I do have a cold at the moment, got a bit of a sore throat, a bit sniffly. I will try to edit out the sniffles and coughs where I can, but just to warn you, I do have a cold. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. For Series Sunday, I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while, which is a Series Sunday of a TV show that I haven't watched in a while. I just finished binge watching season 11 of American Horror Story. This has been a long time coming. This season came out in 22. It was the 19th of October to the 16th of November 2022. I'm like 2 years late to this one. For some bizarre reason I just wasn't in the right mood to watch it, but now I have. I'm ready to go on to season 12 now as well. I feel like I'm in the right headspace to watch something like this. Amazingly, I did not know what the subtitle of this one was, and I didn't actually know any spoilers. Somehow I'd managed to completely miss anything about this season. But yes, this one is NYC, and it takes place in 1980s New York City. And this was a very interesting season, I think mainly because of how real it was. And I wonder how many other people cottoned onto stuff before everybody else did, because since finishing it I have looked up a couple of like how people reacted to it, and a lot of people didn't cotton on to what was going on, whereas me, it only took one watch of the opening credits to understand what was happening. The first episode does play a bit of a blinder on you and makes you think about other things, especially with the deer storyline in the first episode that's like quietly woven in, just to kind of put it into your mind something else is going on. But then also, because this happened after 2020, everybody's got something else on their minds as well. So having lived through the COVID pandemic, and I'll admit, for people who lived through the 80s when the subject of this season was happening, I can only imagine what that must have been like. And it really does make you think. I'm being very cryptic, but basically the big spoiler of this season is that it's about the AIDS pandemic. You're seeing it from the point of view of gay men living in New York City in the 1980s, not knowing what's happening, and a group of people who you find out are actually all interwoven and connected, which makes it such a perfect storytelling. It feels weird to talk about a season of American Horror Story in this way. For the horror side of things, this was a very interesting one. You've technically got two killers happening. Obviously I have started this off straight away with a spoiler for people who don't actually know what's going on in this season, but it's kind of unavoidable because I just can't not talk about that. And to be honest, I don't think I really stayed away from spoilers in my other videos I've done about American Horror Story, but for this one there really is a big question mark over that storyline throughout the whole thing, and it's not even perfectly explained. There's a lot of theories left in your mind about it. So I'm just going to go through the ensemble cast of this one. Obviously we have seen quite a few of the regulars leave over the past couple of seasons, and so in this one the ensemble cast includes Russell Tovey, Joe Mantello, Charlie Carver, Billy Lord, Leslie Grossman, Sandra Bernhard, Isaac Cole Powell, Zachary Quinto, who we've brought back, it's been a long time since we've seen him in this, Dennis O'Hare and Patti LuPone. And I'll admit, I've always thought that Patti LuPone and Sandra Bernhard are quite similar looks-wise, so seeing them on screen together was quite a moment for me, because I don't think I'd ever seen them side by side, and it was just like, nope, for me they still have a similar presence, so seeing them together was kind of a wonderful moment for me. You're mainly seeing it through Gino, played by Joe Mantello, so I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that surname, you can correct me in the comments, and you're seeing his relationship with Patrick, who's played by Russell Tovey, who is a police officer. And then in there you've also got Charlie Carver as Adam, Billy Lord as Dr. Hannah Wells, Leslie Grossman as Patrick's soon-to-be ex-wife Barbara, and then you've got Sandra Bernhard playing Fran, Isaac Cole Powell playing Theo, Zachary Quinto playing Sam, and Dennis O'Hare playing Henry Grant, with appearances by Patti LuPone as a Kathy, who is kind of a lounge singer style in the public baths. And then you've also got Jeff Hiller as Gideon Whiteley. That casting of Jeff Hiller in this, terrifying. And he's mainly known for comedy, so seeing him in such a dark role, it was just like, but there's something about his look that works so perfectly in that role. Terrifying, seriously. Yeah, you've also got Cal Penn in this, who I first saw in House. It's a cool cast, and they were a really, really good ensemble together. You've seen it from mainly Gino's point of view. Through to the end, you're mainly seeing Gino, but you do have those moments where you're understanding how they are kind of connected and how it all will come together. It's called American Horror Story, and yes, what they lived through was a horror, and it's understandable why American Horror Story went down this route, but it felt closer to a murder mystery detective type thing. I think because one of the main characters is a police officer and you are seeing that investigation, you are seeing Gino's rebellion against the police, essentially, because they're not taking these disappearances and deaths seriously, because you've seen a lot of the gay community dying and disappearing, and even when there's only a few, the police just aren't taking it seriously at all. I can only imagine just how difficult a time it was to live through. This was a point in history when they didn't know what this illness was, because it seemed to be only the gay community, and it was a point when the gay community wasn't as accepted as it is now. It was easier, for lack of a better word, to brush it aside, but you have Gino and Patrick as a not openly out policeman fighting back, and Gino is a writer for a newspaper, but it was actually a real newspaper, I think it was, talking about the gay community and trying to use that newspaper to warn people of what was happening, especially because you have, as I said, two killers in this. You have an actual serial killer who is identified quite early on as played by Jeff Hiller, which is Gideon Whiteley. But yeah, I really did find this season really powerful in telling the story of the horror of living through finding out about the virus and how it was spread. And it is interesting with Billie Lourd as Dr. Hannah Wells, because obviously she's a doctor, you see her investigating things, and actually toward the end of the season you find, I think is it Gino that finds it, or is it, I think it is Gino that hears the tapes that she made, where she starts to connect the dots in regards to the virus as she sees it and what she is going through. So in regards to her pregnancy and the fact that she was artificially inseminated, she had somebody donate their sperm to her, and so her tapes at the end where she's connecting the dots and doing the research and things, because at the beginning there's a bit of a red herring by looking at the deer on, what island is it? Fire Island, and finding out that there is a virus discovered in these deer, and at the end of the first episode she takes state troopers out and is just like, look, this isn't a nice thing to do, but the fact is all these deer are actually really sick and we cannot risk them infecting other deer, other animals, maybe even us, and so they have to kill this herd of deer because of the virus that they have. And I feel like that does put a little bit of a thing in your mind. It's just like, oh, is it this virus from the deer that is now infecting everybody else? Kind of planting that seed of that virus. Though I must admit the opening credits really did paint a picture for me as to what was happening, because there was lots of things in regards to blood and vials. Yeah, it was just such a powerful season, and when you get to the end and you find out about that physical representation of the virus and how that played into the whole season. He is called something, what is it, Big Daddy. Big Daddy is kind of the other killer of the season, which is just a very large man in leather. He haunts people, He appears to kill people. That's why the ending is so, like, it's not all fully explained, because we have seen Big Daddy throughout the season actually physically kill people, and then you find out at the end that Big Daddy is actually a representation of the virus. And so you're going, well then how did this physical representation of a virus strangle someone? And you're trying to understand that mentality. At the same time, I'm thinking it's kind of a mixture of being a metaphor, a physical representation of something that isn't actually physical, and something else which you're not entirely sure of. I feel like I don't know how to talk about this season. Those last couple of episodes are actually really powerful. I'm sure other people who have watched it will have had a bit of a weird response to a moment in the last episode where you see Big Daddy at the head of a grave, and you see all these people falling in to this open grave, and you're seeing how Big Daddy is essentially taking these people through. And it's just like, sometimes throughout the season I saw Big Daddy as a physical representation of the virus, killing people like this murderer, and then at other times he was almost like a guardian angel, somebody watching over them, or even just a dark angel watching them. But it's just like the people that actually actively engaged with that physical representation were the ones that had a more physical moment with Big Daddy, if that makes sense. And then you've got the other ones who like caught a glance or were aware of the shadow of Big Daddy, who were able to kind of stay away from. I think I'm still understanding and trying to interpret Big Daddy in this season, and the role of Big Daddy as a human representation of something that isn't human or physical. Because ultimately by the end you realise that Big Daddy is a human representation of the virus. But the way that shadow kept popping up, I think it took me about 3 episodes, I think, because I did it in 3 days. I watched 3 episodes on the first day, I got up to episode 6 on the second day, and then today is the day that I finished it, and I watched 7, 8, 9 and 10, because it's 10 episodes this season. Yeah, I remember going to sleep after the 3rd episode thinking, is this some sort of representation of the virus that the deer have? That's where my brain was, based on having seen the opening credits. And admittedly, once I've watched the opening credits for American Horror Story once, I do not feel the need to watch it again. I actually kind of find the opening credits more scary than the actual episodes. Is that though I must admit, there were a couple of moments when I had to just look away or like block my ears off while I was watching it, because there is a serial killer in this that chops people up. I think other people who have watched this will know what I'm talking about. There's a couple of episodes where you see the serial killer chopping people up, and I could not handle that sound at all. People who have watched these videos before me talking about American Horror Story know that I cannot handle the sound of body parts breaking. I remember an episode of House where there was something about his arm like dislocating, and I was like, no, can't handle that sound. And so the fact that you got this whole sequence of a body being chopped up, and I was wearing headphones at that point, I was like, no, I have not listened to that. I didn't mind watching it because it's just like, I know that's not real, but somebody has tried to emulate the sound of somebody being chopped up, and I'm just like, no, cannot hear that. Weird. I can handle body parts clicking, but the idea of bones breaking, no, absolutely not. I remember it was in what was the double feature one, where there was a scene where the guy was drinking blood. It just like, I don't mind watching it, but the sound of it, no. I found out I don't do well with sounds. Looking at gore, I'm fine. The sounds of certain things really give me the creeps. And that's putting it lightly, because like as soon as that chopping scene started, I was just like, nope, headphones off, I don't mind watching it. And obviously I could hear it very faintly from the headphones, but I was just like, I am not putting those headphones back on until I can see that that body is chopped up. No, I cannot handle that. And then there's another scene a bit later on where somebody purposely chops their hand off in trying to get some handcuffs off, and I was just like, because like you got the anticipation of that scene, where he's looking around trying to find a way to get these things off his wrist, and then he sees like this chainsaw, and he's just going, well, and I'm just there going, no, please don't do it. But it's American Horror Story, so of course there was the cult season which had Chaz Bono, and there's an episode where he chops his hand off so that he can go and vote, because he's being restrained because people know who he's going to vote for, and they're just like, we don't want him to influence this election, and he's there going, nope, I am going to chop my hand off to get out of these restraints, and I'm going to go vote. And again, it was one of those moments where it's just like, no, cannot hear that. I don't mind looking at it, but hearing it, no. I don't know what it is about that sound, but I just like, no, I cannot handle that at all. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my responses to certain things in horror. Yeah, I just found the horror in this one a bit more subtle, because the bulk of it is a policeman investigating a serial killer. I felt like it was more just a very dark murder mystery, which, to be honest, is kind of, it's more down my alley, that, because I've always liked murder mysteries, and so as I've gotten older, the idea of things being a little bit gorier hasn't really bothered me. When it comes to horror, I think it's more like about the jump scares and things, but I'm definitely getting so much better with that, especially since having Paranormal Activity at the theatre. That was a very interesting experience. But yeah, I feel like I've gone off on a complete tangent now. But yeah, I really enjoyed this season. It was definitely a very powerful season, looking at life in the 80s and people living through that. And I feel like there's an extra layer to it now that we have gone through COVID. I say gone through, it is still there. I think anybody who didn't live through the beginning of the AIDS crisis, it's added a new layer of empathy for people who lived through it now that we have gone through COVID. Is that the best way to say that? I'm not sure. I hope you understand what I mean by that, though. I'm not saying that we wouldn't have empathy if we hadn't lived through COVID. I'm just saying that it adds an extra layer to it. Interesting collection of thoughts from having finished watching American Horror Story NYC earlier today. As I said, I feel like I cottoned on through a mixture of the opening credits and where my head was at the end of episode 3, and then those last 3 episodes really goes into confirming what had already been kind of drip-fed through the other episodes. But I think the reason why it does confuse, the way it tiptoes around it, is that physical representation of it with Big Daddy and how he interacts with people, that character, because you can't quite pinpoint how that physical representation adds up. Is that the best way to say it? I hope people understand what I mean when I say that. It probably makes a lot more sense to people who have watched this season, understanding my thought process as I watched it. I'll admit there was one particular scene that I think will stay with me, and it's the moment when the doctor, Hannah, by that point she's figured out a lot of it, and she calls her mum to say that obviously she is pregnant and she is ill. And there's just something about that scene of just her by herself on the phone with her mum that really struck me, and I feel my eyes welling up a little bit thinking about it. Billie Lourd in that scene was just so raw. I feel like she could win an award with that scene alone. I actually don't know what the awards were like for this season, but I did see that it was a well-reviewed season. This one got the Glad Media Award for Outstanding Limited Anthology Series. It was nominated for that, and it was also nominated for TV Drama at the Queer Ties Awards. That was nominated as well. To not be able to see any wins is kind of shocking to me, because I just thought that was such a powerful season, and I thought the ensemble cast were absolutely incredible together. I'd have to have a really real think about where I think it rates on my enjoyment level, because this is really one that makes you think, and it hasn't gone down that classic horror route when you think of American Horror Story. So I always say that I think that the first season was such a good one, coming in with a bang, which is that typical haunted house, and I really enjoyed 1984, the one that had so many tributes to like all the classic horror movies and like The Final Girl and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was really clever, and Cult is definitely up there as well as just the full-on killer clown one. I'd say that I'd put this in the top 5 with those. So across the 11 seasons, the ones I've just mentioned are definitely in the top 5. I just don't know what order to put them in. So to say that in my top 5, I'm going to include NYC, 1984, Cult. Is it Freak Show? Yeah, that's the one with Fritzy the Clown with John Carroll Lynch. Yeah. Murder House. But I must admit, looking at the seasons, I think Coven is probably tied with another season in that top 5. I want to put 6 of them in my top 5. I have to have a really serious think about what order I'd have to put everything in. If anything, I think I'd put this on an even playing field with Cult, because it's 2 seasons that were very much based on a real thing, which added to the horror. You know, it's not like you've got like Coven and witches and things and bringing evil people back from the dead. This is actually a real thing that happened, or a real thing that can happen, and that's what makes it 10 times scarier. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap that up now. That was season 11 of American Horror Story NYC. If you have any thoughts on my thoughts, don't be afraid to share them in the comments. It'll be interesting to see other people's thoughts or responses to this season and how they reacted to Big Daddy and the reveal of who Big Daddy was. But yeah, that last sequence of the final episode, when you see Gino by himself, having watched all of these people go, knowing that he's not that far away himself. It was just an incredibly powerful and sad ending, but it was the only ending it really could have had. There wasn't a happy ending, really. Like, yes, we figured out what the virus was, and we still live with it, but there isn't really a happy ending to the story. That feels like a very somber note to end this on. I just realised I kind of completely ignored Roanoke, and I absolutely loved Roanoke. That split was something that I don't think anybody saw coming. So the next season is Delicate, and I have heard that Delicate is actually based on a book, so that will be an interesting one. And also, Kim Kardashian is in that season. I must admit, I do have a bit of a guilty pleasure of watching the Kardashians, but only because it makes me feel a little bit better about myself. And I know a lot of people think, well, just like, why are they famous? And it's just like, well, they've created a business. And you can't deny the fact that they are all pretty good business women at this point. I'll just say that. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. As I said, if you do have any thoughts on this season that you want to share, pop it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video. Stay safe, everybody. I love you all. Goodbye.